Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca, Operations Manager and Regulated Canadian Immigration Consultant at Moving to Canada, and today we are talking about category-based draws. We recently published an article around whether IRCC will end category-based draws. Category-based draws are a draw type from within the Express Entry pool. Express Entry is one of the most popular programs or widely known programs for Canadian immigration. We're going to go into category-based draws and whether they're serving the purpose and what IRCC might do about it. Category-based draws were established in 2023, and the idea behind them was that IRCC would be more flexible in the type of applicant that they could select. So rather than just selecting the top ranking applicant, they were able to be more agile and select certain applicants to fill IRCC objectives. Those objectives were to satisfy evolving economic needs and other government priorities. So right now in 2025, there are 6 categories that form the category-based draws. One skill-based, which is the French language proficiency draws. So French language draws are not economically driven in that they're not there to fill a labour shortage. They're really there to try and populate Francophone communities outside the province of Quebec. Then we have 5 categories that target different occupation groups. Those occupation groups are STEM workers, healthcare workers, trade workers, education workers, and agricultural workers. These draws have been happening now, say, for the last 2 years when they were first introduced. In theory, category-based draws are a good thing. They allow the Canadian government to be adaptable to the needs as they are. But in reality, it turns out there are more concerns around whether the category-based draws are really serving their purpose. So let's take a look at the different types of draws to see what's going on, whether they're satisfying the objective, and what IRCC can do about it. Starting with French language draws. French language draws have been accused of really dominating the system in 2025. They have by far received the biggest share of category-based ITAs that have been issued, and some critics have really honed in on this and said it's overshadowing the occupational needs. So again, I'm just going to point out the reality. French language draws are not competing with other category-based draws which are occupation-based because they serve 2 different purposes. Again, the French language serve government priority of populating Francophone communities outside the province of Quebec. Occupation are really there for economic needs. So IRCC have set really ambitious targets for French-speaking population. They want 8.5% of new permanent residents to be French-speaking for 2025. A internal document released or acquired by RCIC Mandeep Linda suggests that IRCC know the only way that they can meet that target is via the Federal Skilled Worker Programme. The Federal Skilled Worker Programme is an immigration programme within the Express Entry pool. In order for us to reach our 8.5% target, we need to select Federal Skilled Worker applicants from the Express Entry pool that have French-speaking ability. So that's why we're seeing so many French draws. So is this working? The same internal memo document suggests that actually, by increasing the volume of targeting French language proficiency applicants in the FSW program, the approval rate has dropped. So from September 2024, the approval rate was around 92%. Fast forward a few months to February 2025, that has plummeted to 68 to 75%. The refusal rate has increased, which means they have to issue more invitations to get a moderate amount of applicants because not as many people will be accepted. Add to that, many of the French-speaking applicants that are selected via the Federal Skilled Worker Programme, there's more migration patterns to Quebec, so that has increased. The number of people landing and ultimately moving to the province of Quebec has increased in the last few years, and it was roughly around 26% in 2024. If we're looking at the sole purpose of the Federal Skilled Worker Programme and French language draws specifically being to populate provinces outside of Quebec, if 26% and rising are moving to the province of Quebec, then it shows that the French language draws aren't reaching programme objectives. And there's obviously room there to try and encourage these applicants selected to stay outside the province of Quebec. So for French language proficiency draws, the objective is clear: populate Francophone communities outside of Quebec. The outcome is not looking so great right now. Moving on to category-based draws, which focus on occupations. So these are designed to satisfy and fill economic needs, labour needs within Canada. So as I said, there's 5 occupations that form the category-based draws, with only healthcare, trades and education really being focused on 2025. Now, trade has been really highly anticipated. It was prioritised in the immigration levels plan that was released at the end of 2024, but up until September 18th, there was no trade draw. So everyone's like, what is going on with trade draws? They said they were going to prioritize them. We haven't seen one yet. What's going on? We did get some insights from an internal memo that was released by RCIC, Mandeep, Linda again. That internal memo suggested that the reason why there were no trade draws in 2025 up until this point was because the dominance of cooks within the trade category, so between 55 and 60% of ITAs would have gone to cooks. Why does this happen? It's because the way the category-based draws are made up is there could be huge discrepancy between the CRS score. So the CRS score is how an applicant is ranked between one occupation and another occupation. In the example of trade occupations, there's 25 different occupations that form the trade list. It could be that cooks get more CRS points because of their education. Perhaps some trades like welders, for instance, have a harder time getting their education assessed. So if you're selecting people based on their merits of how they rank in a system, but that system isn't necessarily fairly attributing points, then you come to the issue that we have is that one occupation is dominating the list. So in this case, if we look at the draw that did take place, the trade draw that did take place on September 18th, 1,250 ITAs were issued. And if we look at 6% of those were cooks, that means out of the 1,250 ITAs issued, around 750 would have gone to cooks. That means 500 would have gone to the other 24 trade occupations. So Canada now might be okay for cooks, but it means the other 24 occupations have been overlooked because cooks dominated the trade list. And so that shows a flaw. It shows that they're not getting their diversity from the categories that they need to really meet the objective of satisfying economic needs. A real life example of this was reported by the Toronto Star in the last week. They ran a story about a 49-year-old family doctor in Ontario who had hundreds of patients, or who has hundreds of patients on his roster. He's a temporary foreign worker in Ontario. If you're in Canada, you've heard that Canada is suffering a massive shortage of doctors. Ontario itself is, I think there's currently around 2.5 million people in Ontario waiting for a family doctor. This is a clear evidence that this person who is authorized and regulated to work in Canada, we need this type of worker. Yet this doctor who's been working in Canada for 2 years did not qualify for any healthcare draws to date because of his age. He's older, so he's 49 years old, which means he loses ranking points for his age. If this doesn't highlight the gap between policy and reality, then I don't know what does. The express entry system, Canadian experience class, they exist for this type of example, this type of economic immigrant that can clearly establish themselves in Canada, fill a labour shortage, yet they're not being selected from this program. So that in itself shows there's an issue. There's an issue somewhere that has to be fixed, and it's not going to be an easy fix. So what could IRCC do about it? IRCC are definitely weighing up their options. I don't think they have a choice. And to be fair, when programs are released, they do go through these iterations of development as times progress as well. The express entry system's been around now for 10 years. Category-based draws have been around for 2 years. It's time to review. It's time to say, okay, is this working or not? And if it's not working, what can we do about it? So there's a few things that they can do about it. To start off with, they could cap the number of invitations per occupation. This is not something that would be like completely new. Prior to the express entry system between 2012 and 2015, the Federal Skilled Worker Programme operated on a priority occupation list. So in order to submit an application, you had to have an occupation that was on a priority list. What's more, they only accepted a certain amount of those applications. So say if software engineers were on the list, they would only accept 300 software engineers a year. So they could do something like that in the express entry system relatively easily. They could exclude overrepresented occupations if they've already issued too many invitations to that type of occupation. So let's use the trade occupation again as an example. It could be the next trade draw. They say, you know what, in the last draw, we invited way too many cooks. So we're not going to accept cooks anymore because we've already issued more ITAs to cooks than other occupations. Another thing they could do relatively easily, they could tighten eligibility. So they could say they could focus ITAs on people licensed to work, already got the regulatory body behind them so they could work. That would require some additional back and forth with the regulatory body, might require some additional work, wouldn't be as easy to implement. And finally, they can combine category-based draws with program-specific draws. So this is something I think IRCC are thinking about doing in the 2024 and 2025 public consideration survey that they send out each year. They indicated that this was something they're exploring. This would mean that when they issue, and let's use use a healthcare draw as an example. When they do a healthcare draw, they make the draw specific to people that qualify for the Canadian Experience class. This one is particularly interesting because if we do look at 2024 numbers, 51% of healthcare ITAs went to workers outside of Canada. If we're taking the example of the doctor, the 49-year-old doctor in Ontario who didn't receive an ITA, if we were to exclude or make healthcare draws specific to those that qualified for Canadian Experience, then he would have likely got an ITA because he would be excluding a whole cohort of applicants. Again, it's a very sensitive topic, but objectively, if the goal is to highlight and invite people which serve an economic need, this individual is already working in Canada, they have the licensing, they have the job, that's the kind of applicant that should still be getting an ITA. And it is a very tough call to make. The reality is there is a limited number of invitations that can be issued. I think my colleague Stephanie Ford put it really well in the article she wrote covering this, that for every candidate invited, there's an equally qualified, deserving, hardworking candidate that dreams to live in Canada permanently. And so by inviting one or prioritising one over the other, there's always someone that's going to be left out. And I think that's the reality, unfortunately, of the category-based draws. And if we really hone it in on the objective of reaching and filling economic labour needs, the category-based draws have to be more respondent to these economic needs that Canada is currently suffering. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I know we do have several articles on this topic when it comes to category-based draws and express entry in general. If you'd like to read some of our articles, head over to the news section of our website. We do publish a daily newsletter which gives you all the latest up-to-date immigration news, media coverage. We go into finances, we go into settlement, we go into careers. So if that's something of interest to you, be sure to sign up for our newsletter to make sure that you receive all the information you need to succeed in Canada. Thanks.